Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I am Anarata Bashaliva with co-host Dr. Victor Fett, Dr. Katerina Shrey, and our program producer, Professor Larry Shrey. We host a weekly discussion panel on Russia's war on Ukraine with guests from Ukraine, military experts, medical personnel, academics, artists, literary figures, and relief workers. Our panel is recorded and circulated nationally and internationally. We appreciate your comments and feedback. Special thanks to Marshall University Libraries and MUIT for making this weekly event possible. If you are joining us live on Teams, please feel free to use the chat to post any questions or comments for our guest. A quick greetings to our viewers in Ukraine from Professor Katerina Shrey.
Вітаємо наших слухачів в Україні з глибоким покліном. Ми далі свідки вашого страшного терпіння і також вашої великої сили. Дякую вам за вашу участь в нашій тижневій програмі.
Thank you very much. And today's guest will be Pastor Dr. Yeager and Dr. Robert McCollister, and they are working for the sunflower seeds that includes Tristate Aid for Ukraine. And first, if you would like to introduce and tell more about yourself, please go ahead. And the first is Pastor Dr. Yeager.
Thank you. I just for complete disclosure, I'm not a doctor. I am I'm just a pastor. But thank you for that introduction. We're happy to be here. I am also the president of Sunflower Seeds Inc., which is our Sunflower Seeds Inc. is Tri-State Aid for Ukraine. Tri-State meaning West Virginia, Kentucky, and Ohio in this region. We've been incorporated since January of 2022. I will tell you that our initial, we called it a prayer service for Ukraine, which marked the 1 year of the war on February 24th, 2023. Only 9 months ago, we have been able to raise over $25,000. We have a goal of $100,000. So if we do the math, we have continued to get about $100 a day since in that 9-month period. However, if you continue doing the math, it's going to take us 3 years to get to 100,000 at that rate. So we have got to step it up. And I would initially ask for not donations, but volunteers. If there's anybody in the tri-state region who has any inkling of trying to support humanitarian aid for this effort, please get in touch with me. Our information is at Sunflower Seeds Tristate.com. That's our website, sunflowerseedstristate.com. I do want to give some good news and an update. The last time we were on, I think, was in August. We are now an official 501c3 organization, and what that means is that we don't pay taxes. It's also the gold standards for charitable tax deductions for our donors. I do want to give a special credit to Congresswoman Carol Miller's staff, Nicholas Gray, who worked with us for months, and we had some assurances last summer that the paperwork would get approved by October, November, but a funny, not funny story. But on Friday, October 13th, we found out that we had not provided the documentation that was needed for an expedited review. And we were also informed that that was due on October 16th, the following Monday. So some of us got real busy and got everything together on Saturday. And we had to document why we needed this expedited review. And the first reason was, well, we didn't know about it. The second was that we had been denied grants because we had not been designated as a 501c3, and that was true. We had 2 donors who needed the what's called a letter of determination. And the second, or I should say the third and most important is that we had a mission for a emergency operation. And what could be more of an emergency operation than trying to help 8 million refugees? So that helped. And then, of course, the other reason is if we pay taxes, then we have less money for supplies. Evidently, that was good enough. And on the 24th of October, just a few days later, we were given our letter of determination. So what a great indication, at least for me, or confirmation of God's part of this project we've been in, and that's been evident since day one. I always want to give credit to John Patrick Grace, who got us going back it was summer of 2022. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to talk about was our primary mission is still focused with our partners in Orange, France. We call it the Orange Connection. To date, we have given over $7,400. We are in contact with them recently and are planning to give another $3,800, which would be a total of over $11,000. Our partners in France, Christian Solidarity, Sunflower Seeds is to Huntington as Christian Solidarity is to Orange. In other words, they're a private organization, private nonprofit that can do things that, of course, the public agency can't do, and it's the same here. But they have a very wide mission, and that includes aid to any place where there are issues. Sandrine Pierre, Dr. Sandrine Pierre, who is our secretary of our board, is the one who is from Orange, and she made this connection. And she informed us that Lebanon is known as France's little sister. And so some of the aid workers that are involved with us were involved with some of the providing help during this situation and involved with the Palestinians and Israelis conflict. So they were a little bit distracted. They are back on the scene. As I said, we heard from them just this past Wednesday. There's a delivery to Jaroslaw, Poland. Again, speaking of sisters and little sisters, of course, Orange and Jaroslaw, Poland are sister cities, and that's how this connection was originally made, as Jaroslaw was being overrun with refugees from Ukraine. They're just 25 miles from the Ukrainian border, and they reached out to Orange for help, and that's how this all got started. This will actually be the 6th delivery of humanitarian aid items from Orange. Typically 2,200 pounds of material, food, medical supplies are delivered. And I'm not talking about necessarily cans of soup. We're talking about EKG machines. We're talking about ultrasound machines. We're talking about hospital beds, things that are of utmost importance. And the real key is the fact that Jaroslaw and Orange communicate, so they are painfully aware of the needs of the refugees, specific needs of the refugees, and that generated our purchase last time of 30 combat level first aid kits plus 3 what I call operating rooms and a backpack, total of which was close to $4,000. And we're very proud to say that many of those items reached beyond Poland, several cities in Ukraine and the front lines. So we're very proud of that. And along those lines, I want to talk a little bit of how, things just happen, these coincidences, which I call God's way of being anonymous. So as a pastor on Sunday mornings, I usually try to do a quick review of the world news just to see if there's anything changing or any prayer needs. And last Sunday, I stumbled across a CNN interview with a young woman named Anna I knew I was going to Flipova, Anna Flipova. And she is a young woman. She collects funds from the area around Western Ukraine and delivers them to, of course, Eastern Ukraine. These are typically the same kind of things we're delivering, high-level combat level first aid requirements, bandages, and so on. And she personally delivers them to the front lines. And so for this baby boomer, I had to get on Twitter, now known as X, because that was the only information I had. So I am now on Twitter, unfortunately, or X, I should say. But through that, I was able to connect with her via email, and we will be sending her some money for her efforts as well. And also trying to set up a appearance or interview with her on M Ukraine in the future. This weekend, she is delivering to the front line. So we pray and wish her safe travels, definitely. Also, again, since August, we discovered or found out that the Catholic Charities here in West Virginia is involved with the Ukrainian refugees who have found their way to West Virginia, and we're in the process of funneling money to them as well for their needs. So we're expanding a bit in our mission. Well, again, I'll say, if there's anybody out there who is local, we could use some volunteers' assistance as we expand our demands on our time increase. I will also share this. I am retiring at the end of January from my duties as pastor at my church, and that's good news because I'll be able to spend a little more time on this important effort, which reflects completely the Jesus's requirement that we feed the hungry and give drink to the thirsty and clothe the naked and visit the sick and imprisoned, and refugees, as we all know, fit all those categories from Matthew 25. So it's very humbling in a way that we've been able to be put in this position to try to reach out to these people who we'll never meet, most likely. So, okay, the sermon's over. I do want a little bit more news. Our new website is up and running thanks to Bullseye Total Media. They totally did a fantastic job on both that and the video. Our 3-minute video is also on that website. Again, www.sunflowerseeds tristate.com. There's also a active donate button in case anybody's interested in that. And we are expanding our merchandise offerings. We're working with Blinko Glass. We had a premium, as Patrick calls them, but we were able to procure beautiful sun catchers from Blinko Glass. We got 50 of those, and there's only 6 left, so they sold very well. But we're now expanding that. We're probably going to be doing some what's known as the famous Blinko water bottle, and we'll have some sort of etching on that, reflecting, of course, the Ukrainian symbol or something. Haven't decided that yet. Want to also point out, for those who are taking track of these things, we have a new mailing address. It's P.O. Box 1243, Barboursville, West Virginia, 25504. Again, P.O. Box 1243, Barboursville, West Virginia, 25504. Again, good news that we do have about 3 people who are interested locally who hopefully after the first of the year will get involved with us. We're planning another benefit prayer service for, guess what? February 24th, 2024, which will mark 2 years since this horrible war started. I'm checking my calendar to find out what day of the week that is. I should know that off the top of my head, but I don't. I think it's yes, it's a Saturday, so that's perfect. So Saturday, February 24th. Place to be determined. We are, for those of you locally, you will know about the Collegium Musicum, which is a Renaissance singing group from Cabell Midland High School. They are, actually, I think they're known nationally. If we can get them, just coincidentally, some of the kids are being looked at for a possible event in Cincinnati. So if some of them may have to be in Cincinnati that day. If they're not there, I'm hoping we can get the Huntington High folks again, but we're going to start with those first. And Dr. Bob, who will speak briefly, will be speaking at that event. Also, Sandrine Pierre and Patrick Grace. We'll have a Taizé music as well, which is very moving and beautiful, meditative music. Just a real quick recap of some of our prior presentations. Again, for those locally know of the Woodlands retirement community here, the people up there have been extremely generous. We've received well over $1,000 from the folks there after giving a presentation a couple of weeks ago. We've been to the Barboursville Rotary, Coon Memorial Church, Huntington Women's Club, and many, many more are in the planning stage. And soon to come out is our newsletter, Box 1243. And it's very good articles, and we have a mascot named Sunny. My wife and I just recently rescued Mr. Sunny, aka Sunflower Yeager, and so we've been having fun with Sunny. But we have a mascot now. And I mentioned the new merchandise. Also, we'll be doing ball caps. 2 of our board members are with Coalfields Development, which is a nonprofit, and it's a concept of public entrepreneurship. Again, for those who aren't familiar, Appalachia is kind of an economically depressed area. It's been that way. Extractive industry, for those who have studied this, takes with the coal, they take the money and run, leaving poverty in its wake. So for years and years and years, different groups have tried to assist in the economic development here, but this thing is really working, this idea of public entrepreneurship. And so they have a number of businesses housed there, including Solar Holler, which is a solar panel company doing very well. They do workforce development training, and then they have this graphics and design group. So we'll be procuring ball caps with our logo embroidered on the hats. So I'm sure that'll be a big seller for us. With that, I'll shut up and take any questions, and then turn it over to Dr. Bob McCollister from Ironton, Ohio, and a graduate of Ohio State University and educator at Moorhead and Ohio State, and he can tell you the other spot, which I forgot.
Shawnee.
Any questions?
I see that Dean Deutsch has raised his hand. Dean Deutsch,
Yeah,
the microphone's yours.
We have.
I just want to ask, what do you see as currently the greatest need in Ukraine that we could do?
Well, it goes to these medical kits, not only for the soldiers who are being injured, but obviously the potential for citizens. Anything medical is needed desperately. Not again, like I said, a lot of the problem is the folks who are in-country refugees, especially elderly, that couldn't leave or can't leave, and it's difficult to get them, basic hygiene items. We're talking diapers, adult diapers, we're talking food, we're talking, as I said, pharmaceuticals, medical supplies, but primarily it seems this need for medical supplies. I think if I'm correct, a lot of the funding that is coming from the Western countries is, of course, going for bullets and bombs and military supplies, but not so much for medical supplies. So definitely that seems to be a great need as far as I can see. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I have to leave now and go to the airport. I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Are you able to hear any stories from your counterparts in L'Orange about things that are happening in Yaroslav?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because next Tuesday, actually, Dr. Sandrine's mother is visiting the U.S. from France, and I'm told we will be blessed with some gifts from Yaroslav, that they have sent back some things for us to as gifts for what we've been doing. So to express their gratitude. So I'm so looking forward to that opportunity, but we're not getting a lot of information because the refugee camps, of course, are seen as a soft target. It's hard to get them protection. We do know that the elderly are being taken care of, or the elderly and disabled are being cared for at a monastery near Harislaw by the nuns and brothers there. And we know that some funding has gone toward actually repairing a $5,000 for repair of an elevator there, but not a lot of personal stories or anything like that. It was it's very great that we were able to, as I think I mentioned last summer, we had our 5K and we were able to get to know Sophie, who was a 19-year-old who was here in Huntington for a time from Ukraine. And it's important, I think, for us who are involved with this to get some flesh and blood connections. It's rather than kind of this anonymous group we're giving to. So her, again, God giving us this coincidence that we met her was important, I think, for our motivation. And then this recent connection with Anna, I'm going to hopefully expand on our communications, because now that I have her email and so on, I can talk to her. But yeah, and there's part of this. I just read an article recently. There is fatigue going on everywhere, and it's these little motivational things. Again, the gift giving, the exchange, the talking, all helps us to not forget and to continue the fight, that we're doing in terms of trying to provide the
Pastor
humanitarian.
Yeager, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Much appreciated. God bless you.
God bless you.
I think you are doing incredible work, and I have a question. What was successful in your help, and what did not work? And another question, what do you recommend other non-profit organization in terms of helping Ukraine? Thank you.
Okay, the first was what really worked well in terms of money.
What was, in general, where you see success? What was successful in your incredible work, and what did not work because we wanted to do more?
Yeah. Well, probably the most single successful thing we did was the 5K this past summer. We had about $8,500 worth of donations, and raised that. And then part about $6,000 of that was cash. So that was the single most in terms of monetary success that we've had. The sun catchers, we got them at a ridiculously low price and put a ridiculously high price on them, and I think we've made $3,000 on the sun catcher. So that's about $10,000 right there out of the 25,000 on those two efforts. So I think did that answer both? Did you want to know what didn't work? Was that part of it?
Yeah, I think that we imply to do the maximum actually things, but then something is not working. And
yeah,
I just wanted you to share what did not work, but may work in the future.
Yeah. I guess one of the disappointing, we Dr. Stephanie Skolik, who's a local eye doctor specializing in retina, did a beautiful painting for us. And we did sell that original for $400. We had 30 prints made, signed prints, and those for some reason aren't selling as I hoped they would, and I'm not sure why. And we may have the price too high. So sometimes you have to use your business sense about price points and those kind of things. So we're gonna offer those at a discount in the future. And then what was the what other nonprofits?
Can learn from your activities.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I would say one of our biggest difficulties was getting this 501(c)(3) thing right. We made a couple of mistakes, like there's a threshold, there's a $50,000 a year threshold. So we were thinking big, so we went for the long form, as they say, which is above 50,000.
Mm-hmm.
Use the short form. You can always change it. You got to get that 501(c) designation as soon as you can. Mm-hmm. So go in low, and then you can always change it. As I said, that was probably one of the biggest stumbling blocks. Although our lawyers tell us that, because we are only a charitable donation as per state law, that people who gave prior to our official designation can use that, and of course now they can. But that probably is the biggest lesson, the biggest thing we weren't aware of, or we're not given enough advice about, in terms of the 501(c)(3) designation, which is so important. So yeah, I would stick with that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your insights. And we have the next presenter, Dr. Robert McCollister. Please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. It really is an honor to be a part of Sunflower Seeds. And as I get started, I have to say, people, should understand that John is really the heart and soul of this organization. He devotes far more time to it than anybody else. Patrick Grace has been the inspiration for us and got us started. It's John that really does so much of the legwork. I show up every now and then and make a speech. My job is to try to explain to the people at Tristate why this matters, why this is important for the United States, and why it's a worthy cause for people to give. One thing I would encourage people to do along those lines, if you haven't had a chance, PBS Frontline this week aired a movie called 20 Days in Mariupol. Everyone should see that. Everyone should see this movie. It is heartbreaking and explains what the stakes really are here.
Could you repeat that, Bob?
20 Days in Mariupol. It's on
20
PBS
Days
Frontline. It's streaming on the PBS Frontline's website. Everybody should take a look at that. In terms of the war itself right now, there's been a lot of attention given to General Zaluzhny's letter from early this month, where he talked about the war as a stalemate. And at least on the surface level, it does seem to have aspects of a stalemate right now. If you look at the fighting in the east, where the Russians have once again tried to launch offensives, particularly in the Avdiivka area, which is just north of Donetsk City, they have suffered horrendous casualties when they've gone on the offensive. Also, to a lesser extent, in the area north of there, around a place called Kupiansk. Much has been made about the failure of the Ukrainian summer offensive to make great progress in the area on the drive, especially on the drive to the city of Melitopol, down on the Sea of Azov. And to some degree, we see an element of pessimism starting to creep in among some. Richard Haas has an article in Foreign Affairs where he's beginning to make the argument that Ukrainians need to think about what a political settlement would look like short of absolute victory. I think some of that pessimism is a bit overdone. I think a lot of the stalemate has to do with the fact that, part of it is launching an old-fashioned World War II styled armored offensive is a lot more difficult currently because of the prevalence of precision guided munitions. It can be carried by light infantry, things like javelin missiles. Those kind of things make it very difficult. The presence of drones and the visibility that now exists on the battlefield. It's hard to surprise people. What used to be called the fog of war is not nearly as foggy as it was at one point. And I think those all contribute to what looks like a stalemate. But I do think the word stalemate can be a bit overblown. The Ukrainians, if they are supplied in the near term with especially deep strike weapons, we talk a lot about ATACMS, the Scalp ER missiles that they've been given thus far in small numbers, and others that are possible, the German-made Taurus. If they're able to get those in large enough numbers, I think that can help break that stalemate. And I have come to believe that 2024 is really the decisive year in this war. I think this is the year where the decision will be largely rendered. And what's the decisive terrain? I talk a little bit about this in our newsletter. I think the decisive terrain has now shifted. When Clausewitz talked about centers of gravity, he talked about the source of strength that is the driving force in a nation's war effort, what the center of gravity is. For Russia, it's mass, its size, its firepower. And the Ukrainians with these deep strike weapons are able to carry out a strategy that General McRyan, an Australian general, calls corrosion, where they limit the ability of Russian forces to be, even though they have these supplies, if they cannot move these supplies, if they logistically cannot get them across this gigantic 1,500-mile front and supply the troops at the front end, then the Ukrainians were able, and this is how they pushed the Russians out of Kherson, are able to kind of starve those Russian forces on the vine. And they've been very effective at that, but they need more weapons. And that, to me, tells us what the decisive terrain in this war is going to be. And it's going to be in Western capitals. It's going to be the center of gravity for the Ukrainian war effort in many ways is the West's willingness to supply what needs to be supplied to win the war, to make the decision that we want a Ukrainian victory, and to supply them with the weapons that they need. It is absolutely critical that the United States Congress pass President Biden's $105 billion bill to aid Ukraine, to aid Israel. There's money in there for border security. And that can be decisive, I think, in 2024. Ukraine desperately needs more of the kinds of weapons that it can use to isolate Russian forces at the front, to isolate Crimea in particular. They have made dramatic, there have been dramatic breakthroughs in the Black Sea in their ability to export grain and limit the ability of the Russian Black Sea fleet to affect the course of the war. They've made a lot of progress in that area, but they need more Western help, not just from the United States, but from Europeans, from the Germans, from people all across the NATO alliance. I think that's actually the most important thing that can happen. There's one other development I want to mention real quick, and we had a really distinguished guest on this podcast a few weeks ago from the Naval War College, and I brought this up with him, and that's the Ukrainian advance across the Dnipro in the vicinity of Kherson. If properly supplied, I think that could be the beginning of a really decisive part of this counteroffensive. It's in an area where the Russians did not fortify their defenses nearly as much. Some of those fortifications that they put down, minefields and those kind of things, are actually washed away when they breached the dam at Novokakova. I think there's a chance for a real breakthrough there, and that's only about 70 kilometers from Crimea itself. So I just think the decisive terrain in this now, the West's will to continue this fight. And Putin understands that. Putin understands clearly that this is what matters. His strategy is at this point to outlast the West, to exhaust the West's willingness to continue to supply Ukraine. And once the West has decided that maybe this is not in their national security interests and turns its back on Ukraine, he can win. That's his entire strategy, to wait us out. That he has the will to continue this. He has the will to continue to fight, and that the West doesn't. And you can actually see him doing all kinds of things. I don't know how many people saw this, but in the last couple of weeks, he's been driving immigrants. He has been pushing immigrants to the borders of the Baltics, to the Finnish border, because he understands that one of the things that has undermined democratic governments across, especially Western and Central Europe, has been the immigrant crisis that we saw spike during the Syrian civil war. And that increased support for these very, very far-right parties all across Europe, for Viktor Orban in Hungary, to a lesser extent, the Justice and Law Party in Poland. We just saw this week, the largest vote getter in the Dutch elections was Geert Wilders, who is a militantly anti-immigrant, far-right politician. And he thinks if he can undermine, Putin's strategy is clearly to undermine Western democratic governance and Western support for Ukraine. So the decisive terrain in many ways in the war in Ukraine is going to be in the United States Congress. It's going to be in European parliaments. It's going to be at the ballot box. So I think for all those reasons, 2024 is the decisive year of the war in Ukraine. And I tend to be an optimist on this. I mean, maybe this is a little out of step at the time we feel like we're in right now, but I tend to be an optimist on this. I think we're going to get through this. I think that Congress ultimately will pass aid for Ukraine. It will be difficult. The new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson from Louisiana, will have to find a way to do this. The Senate will pass the appropriation. Senate will pass it. I hope it can include in conference, get included in a conference committee, and then the Speaker will allow a vote. Because if it's put up for a vote, it'll get over 300 votes. It will get over 300 votes. The vote will be overwhelmingly bipartisan. And I think that may well put Ukraine on a path of victory in 2024. And I pray that's true.
I have a question. Do you think it was wise what Biden proposed to bundle the Israeli funding and the Ukrainian funding, and what else did he put in there? There were 4 things.
Border security.
Yeah. Do you think is that what's on the table now, or did that die?
I think that's probably the best way to get it passed, is to build the largest possible coalition, is to include things that, that's kind of the way Congress gets work done. You throw it a little bit in for everybody. But yeah, I think it probably is. And I actually think there's a real rationale for that. I think that what we see across the world right now are threats to democracy. And I'm not going to get into the Israeli-Hamas conflict because it's, first of all, not the subject of this podcast. And if you don't like complexity, you shouldn't talk about the Middle East. It's an enormously complicated situation with historical roots that go way back. But there are threats to democracy from these very far-right fascist forces. We thought we had buried fascism, but you never really bury those ideologies. The extreme ideologies on the far right and the far left, they're always there. They're always around. As the president says sometimes, hate never fully goes away, it just hides. And we're in a period where there's very, very, and Putin is in many ways the leading spokesman for this. We can see it in other countries too. But we see Putin pushing for trying to build alliances with the Orban government in Hungary, with the new government in Slovenia, we see these things building, and he has a role in all that. He has his fingers in all those things.
Good. I have a question, if I may.
Sure.
That I read that 50% of Americans believe that US had done enough to help Ukraine, and other actually experts say that probably the war will continue in 2024 or even 2025. So what we can do in order to avoid a long war and how to end this war, because I listen every day what Russian actually experts and also international experts. Putin presented himself as a winner, as a victor in this situation, because it's a situation in which it actually is a stalemate. And what should be done in this way on both sides? Nobody was prepared for this long war.
Yeah, first of all, American public opinion. American public opinion, there is always, and this is a long tradition in American history, there is, to some degree, always a degree of isolation of sentiment in the American population. Part of that's geography, the fact that the United States is protected by 2 oceans and thousands of miles away from the nearest great power. But that isolation of sentiment is always there. And it's up to our political leaders, and this is why it needs to be bipartisan. It has to some degree become a partisan issue. So we need political leaders on both sides of the aisle. Joe Biden, Mitch McConnell, we need people to make the case and explain why this matters. I think if the war extends much beyond 2024, that plays into Putin's hands. I said this earlier, I think 2024 is the decisive year of the war. I think we have to give Ukraine what it needs to win this year. I don't think that's impossible. I don't think it's a stretch. I actually think the Russian forces are more brittle than we think. Dictatorships are always really strong until they aren't. Armies are really strong until they aren't. I think they're more brittle. I think the losses that the Russians have taken are beginning to add up. I think their supply lines are extended. I think, I hope that once we get the supplies to Ukraine, they can get across the Dnipro. I see that as a really, really promising place. And there are a lot of people who know a lot more about especially the nuts and bolts of running military operations, who could explain more than this than I do. But I think from a strategic point of view, I think that's a real possibility. I think we have to make this the year where Ukraine has a decisive breakthrough and forces Putin to seek a negotiated solution. I think that has to happen. I think this is a year. How about this? I think this is a year we liberate Crimea. And I think once that happens, then I think you could drastically change the way things go. But we have to make the case. 2024 is a really important year in world history. Hadn't come yet, but I think it's going to be decisive. And a victory in Ukraine will deal a terrible blow to these fascist forces that we see arising again. If we don't, I see Ukraine as pivotal. I really have come to believe that this is the pivotal struggle for democracy around the world. And that if it goes badly in Ukraine, I'm afraid where we're headed.
Yeah, in addition to this, there are some predictions, green prediction that after Ukraine, there might be Moldova, Estonia, Armenia. And because for Russia, it's not difficult to invade or the
Yes.
smaller states,
Yeah,
smaller
I mean,
nations.
this is actually part of when we have our meetings, this is one of the things I talk about. If you think that once Russia were to add Ukraine's wealth, Ukraine's population, Ukraine's geography, listen to Timothy Snyder at Yale, who's also from Southern Ohio, like I am. If you listen to Timothy Snyder at Yale, Ukraine is at this pivotal place geographically in Europe. And if once Ukraine is added, now Russian troops are once again in the heart of Europe. And I guarantee that if Ukraine goes, if Russia takes Ukraine, Moldova and Belarus are right behind. And once he sees that NATO no longer has the will to stand up to him, once he can prove that, then I'm afraid that is what leads to a much larger war. Because when you give a dictator the ability to take these things, I mean, all we got to do is look back at the history of the late 1930s and see that once they see that these things are easy, then they're always tempted to go just a little further. And a much larger war is always possible. And given the nature of weapons, as awful as World War II was, I mean, my background is in nuclear weapons and arms control and those things. We don't want a crisis like that to get out of hand.
Great presentation. And any questions? Oh,
I've got
comments?
one. Of course, this being the Thanksgiving holiday, we have conversations. I talked to my sister who's a little bit right of center, and we actually agreed on one thing, that the war would have been better off had we gotten F-16s, and because right now the Russians are able to fight with three hands, and the Ukrainians only have two, meaning they have the air superiority, and the Ukrainians have, just artillery and infantry, no air support. And so my question goes to the F-16s. I think I heard they're going to be the guys will be trained by spring, but do you think it'll make a difference quickly, Dr. Bob?
I think it's important. I think there are reasons. I mean, if you go back, when people go back and write the history of this, why Western aid has not gotten there as fast as it can, I think there are a whole bunch of reasons for that. Fear of escalation obviously is one. And I think part of it was, especially in the beginning, the expectation that Ukraine couldn't last. I think the entire world's been surprised by Ukraine's ability to fight, about their ability to hold on. But in the end, so to speak directly to your question, I do think F-16s, and let me give you a really practical way I think F-16s matter. Okay? So if the Ukrainians are going to get across the Dnipro, they've got to put down pontoon bridges. Okay? They've got to be able to get across it. Probably, and I was listening to an expert yesterday, probably 8 to 10 bridges, because you got to have one that goes across and one that brings empty trucks back. So they're going to need multiple bridges across the Dnipro, which is a serious barrier. To do that, you got to have two things. First, they're going to push back Russian artillery, but you also have to control the skies. If you can't control the air above those bridges, the Russians can take them out. And I think that's a practical place where the F-16 should go. You want it to have good air defense weapons, so the Patriot missiles and what we call the NASAMS and all the other things, the German Iris and the other systems could be decisive, but the Ukrainians are going to need air cover to protect those bridges. Also, another place that F-16s can help with protecting Ukrainian power grid and helping maintain Ukraine's will to fight through what could be another tough winter. But I think that's a really practical way F-16s could make a difference. And it also will add to their long-range strike capability, maybe to take out the Kerch Strait Bridge. those kind of things to destroy Sevastopol, the Russian naval base, airfields in Crimea. So yeah, I think that matters. And the faster they get there, the better.
Thank you.
So, any questions or something to add? I think you did great job there. Thank you very much for your remarkable presentations. And I'm especially pleased because we are local. We are doing what we can do. And I hope we will you will talk again in the near future. And thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and add our final greeting to our viewers in Ukraine.
Yes.
Дорогі браття і сестри в Україні, зберігаємо вас у наших щоденних думках і молитвах. Нехай милосердний Бог тримає вас у своїй опіці. До наступного тижня прощаємося. Слава Україні!
Слава Україні!
Героям!